All right. Good afternoon. Good morning, everyone. This is Kaustubh Jagtap here. I'm the director of product marketing at SafeBreach. I wanted to thank you for taking the time today to attend our interactive fireside session. Before we get started, I just wanted to remind everyone that this webinar, this fireside chat, is being recorded and will be shared with all registrants and attendees after the event is complete. Additionally, it will be also available on our website within a day or so. At any given point of time, if you do have any questions about the content or SafeBreach in general, please send them to us via the Q&A functionality made available to you by Zoom webinar. We shall be answering all questions during the Q&A session. With that being said, let's go ahead and get started. As you're aware, threat actors are constantly updating their TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures to try and get past enterprise network security. In response to that, security teams must also continue to evolve their ability to detect these latest threats and avoid exploitation of security gaps and that can potentially lead to costly breaches. This process is essentially called detection engineering, and it refers to the method of fine-tuning security technologies to better detect malicious activity. Today's fireside chat focuses on understanding or sharing our experts' point of view on how breach and attack simulation or BAS tools can materially improve the knowledge gained by security teams and improve their success in detection engineering to help reduce cyber risk across their entire security program. Our chat today, with that being said, let me go ahead and introduce our amazing subject matter experts. Our chat today will be moderated by SafeBreach CISO Avishai Avivi, or Avi, who is a cybersecurity and privacy leader with over 30 years of experience and a track record of spearheading robust security programs for global organizations. Additionally, our panelists include Derek Klein, SafeBreach's security services director. Derek is a data-driven security leader who believes that great business decisions begin with solid research, robust data analysis, and simplistic presentation of the analyzed data. Our second panelist is Jonathan Tillman, who is our technical account manager. He's a former Marine who works closely with SafeBreach customers to help optimize and supercharge their SafeBreach deployment. Jonathan is a BAS enthusiast who is forever curious and passionate about problem solving. That being said, let's go ahead and get started. Over to you, Avi.
Great. Thank you, KJ. So hi, everybody. Again, just call me Avi if you ever want to reach out and connect. KJ, you started with a quick definition of or description of detection engineering, but Jonathan, just so we level set, can you help really define what is detection engineering and, just at a high level?
Absolutely. So while most engineering tasks involve solving a problem, detection engineering is specifically about solving the problem of how to identify the presence of a concealed threat. This can be generally activity in your environment that you would want to know about. And so it's a problem that's not a cookie cutter function. That's why it's called engineering. There's humans and problem solving and engineering involved, and the key component is finding a balance of the fidelity and accuracy of the detections versus the volume, so you don't have too many to handle, and then managing that within the type of logging and type of compute you have available. It is a emerging, aspect of cyber defense. A lot of organizations are still kind of work out either how to get started or how to really hit their stride and have a sustainable, functional, integrated detection engineering program. And the good news is that technology has progressed to be to a point to where it can be helpful in the workflow for detection engineering. And so that's what we're here to talk about, how BAS can be helpful in part of that workflow.
Great, thank you. So Derek, let's switch over to you. And can you explain why organizations are actually focusing on detection engineering? I mean, obviously it's kind of a new field, a new emerging approach. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. It's definitely up and coming. So why detection engineering, right? The adversary is using living off the land and fileless attack methodologies, and we'll describe that a little bit deeper here in a minute. Some stats. This year's CrowdStrike Global Threat Report tracked 75% of observed attack campaigns were fileless attacks. That's up from just 35% in 2019. So it's definitely becoming more prevalent. The Sophos Threat Report tracked living off the land attack campaigns at 86%. As we start to correlate threat intel, living off the land and fileless attacks are somewhere in the 80% range, and it's probably much higher than that as there are some unknowns. Living off the land and fileless attacks use built-in administrative utilities such as SMB, binaries like run-dll32, and dual-use administrative and pen testing tools such as PSExec and Cobalt Strike. The adversary is getting really good at evading their security controls, all of our security controls, bypassing EDR and endpoint controls, blending in, flying under the radar, using these living off the land and fileless attacks behaviors, right? And we track behavior as tactics, techniques, and procedures. The real battleground is procedures. They're in a constant state of flux. The adversary is consistently innovating, and keeping up is a real challenge. An example, one of many, both nation state and financially motivated adversaries are using residential proxies to hide the source of traffic and appear legitimate, making detection very, very difficult. The abuse of legitimate resources is a real problem, and it's really tough to detect.
Great. So, you know, how do you, we're saying obviously that, or our position is that BAS is helpful in that, but how is detection engineering done without BAS or breach attack simulation?
Sure. Most processes have manual components, and the detection engineering lifecycle, right, is no different. When dealing with tens of detections, manual is not overly painful. As you get into hundreds of detections, and many of our clients are into the hundreds, several hundreds of detections, requirements gathering, including adversary simulation and continuous testing to ensure coverage, really becomes tedious and time consuming, right? Detection drift is a real problem. We've had several customers have an incident, thought their detections were working, only to find out that they weren't. They now automate testing their detections to ensure they are working as expected. And that was a huge lesson learned for them. So it really comes down to operational efficiency, right? Being able to automate as much as possible to get the most out of the system.
Okay, great. So Jonathan, in your experience, how adding BAS to this actually does help?
Absolutely. So the things I'm going to talk about today are examples of some things that customers are doing now as part of their detection engineering workflow. And for that, to help with that discussion, we've got this visual here of detection engineering. This is from a company called Snowflake, who does compute data analytics. And so effectively, this is similar to a software development life cycle, but just applied to developing detections through detection engineering. And so you can see a typical workflow involving development. And coincidentally, we didn't modify the diagram, but where BAS is the most helpful is in the ARM sections, the monitoring and continuous testing. But there is also some overlap in the usefulness in somewhat in the inputs and the requirements gathering and in the initial testing and deployment. So with that being said, I want to go back to the two main strong points of what a BAS tool like SafeBreach does, right? It simulates the activity, either activity that you expect to prevent or that you expect to detect. It's doing a functional test of your security controls as compared to reading the manual, creating a policy, and then creating some logic and then kind of hoping it works. It will just simulate the actual activity that you want to detect or prevent, and then you can see if it worked. And so that is good. But what it also does is then it captures all the system logs so you can make sure and everything ran and did what you expected. Then we have integrations that will go out and get your security logs from your security controls. So you don't have to now open a new tab, log into a couple different controls and kind of see how if they logged or it alerted. Our integration will go out and pull that alert in. You can see right in our console, yes, it alerted, or no, it didn't. Maybe I need to go back and refine, my logic or make sure the right logs exist. And then that's the idea of testing that on one system or in one location. However, different zones, different locations, maybe a subsidiary data centers, they can have different policies or completely even different controls. And so having BAS simulators out in different parts of the environment is automatically a predetermined and pre-authorized system for testing in a very particular environment. Because ideally your alerts aren't just going to work in your lab. Ideally, they'll work everywhere in your environment you want them to work. And so it's about not just having one person doing testing on one machine. It's about having technology doing the same test every time in multiple places and keeping track of all the data and all the results, so the human can focus on the parts that really need that human mind to still do. And yeah, that's a pretty general overview. I can get into yeah, that's a really good overview. I think I would take up too much time if I got into many more.
Great. No, that's perfect. So actually, I'd like to add a couple of comments to that. I think, as we look at the graphic, and I apologize if the font is a little bit small. We will share a link to the article and the location where we actually obtained this graphic. But in my view, and again, I've been a CISO for way longer than I care to admit. And any program, any development lifecycle does include a testing aspect to it. And testing, you don't want to just wait for the test to the end of it. So even when you gather requirements and design your program, you want to think about, okay, how am I going to test this and validate that my detection is working as expected? And I think in my experience, because we're not just, I'm not just the CISO for SafeBreach. I'm also a SafeBreach customer. BAS helps me even think through the testing of our own detection engineering. So part of our design is where are we going to be deploying these detection methods? Where are we going to be actually doing the testing? Who's going to be involved? We also think about what are the threat models that we're contending with, and what threat intel can we feed into that process as well. Because again, the other thing that BAS gives us is really the ability to not have to come up with the attacks on our own. Don't have to figure out how to emulate this particular threat group or this particular ransomware. Everything comes in the tool itself or the platform. And so we're able to leverage that. And then to your point, Jonathan, the monitoring and actually testing out the result and doing it repeatedly with the same consistent testing, same consistent inputs to validate that our outputs, our detection mechanisms are actually working as designed. So with that, JT, Jonathan, who do you think actually can benefit from using BAS as part of their detection engineering?
Fantastic. Yeah, that will allow me to go a little bit deeper into some tangible examples. So companies with a security program that are initially creating alerts and just wanting to get into detection engineering, you may be looking at the overall level of effort or what you would need to put into and invest, excuse me, in detection engineering. And so understanding how technology can be an assist and alleviate some of that workflow, that can sometimes put it over the threshold of starting a detection engineering. That like the the best time to start detection engineering was maybe a few years ago, but the second best time is today. So, and it's mostly because when your controls are deployed out of the box, they do a good job. And a lot of security controls have some alerts that are kind of built in and out of the box, but they might not be all enabled. And so, and the reason is because the parts that are kind of come out of the box, they're a one size fits all for particular detections that should be kind of relevant in all environments. However, when you have organizations, you might be in an organization where you've got all this stuff deployed, you've got the basics going, but you're looking now to fine tune to say, okay, this detection is good, but I need to fine tune it not just for the equipment and the applications in your environment, but also for some of the activity in your environment in different zones. All of these things, if you're looking to increase the fidelity, the accuracy of an alert to your SOC, well, detection engineering is really the primary way to do that. And that means, if you say, well, maybe 2 out of every 10 times this detection fires, it's an actual, threat that should be investigated. That I think is a pretty low fidelity, whereas you can have a confidence level of like 80% of the time when this detection fires, hey, that'd be great. Your analyst, if you think in the mind of an analyst, if like maybe 10% of the things are less that come for them to investigate, are not interesting or actionable, then that's it leads to fatigue. So if you're looking to refine and optimize that, if you have a threat team that's tasked versus um, assessing posture or preparing to defend against particular threats, custom detections are a fantastic way to do that. And so that covers a little bit about getting into and kind of standing up and starting a detection engineering process. However, it's also been incredibly useful for, as Avi mentioned, our customers that are in the hundreds and high level of hundreds of alerts. We have a specific customer who was spending so much time with the maintenance and validation to make sure all the alerts they had created were still working, that they had very little, if any, time to actually make new detections. And so when you have already somewhat established detection engineering process, the continuous testing, the continuous validation, that's also a huge strength of BAS, is that it can run the same. You can have 500 attacks that all are designed to trigger that exact alert. You can run those every week or every day to make sure those alerts start happening. That's really important because you might think, oh, well, maybe like, my environment changes, logging breaks, and maybe like once a year an alert might fail. And I mean, that's not good. But when you think about what happens when you get 300-400 alerts, like that could be one a day. And so a lot of our customers are finding that they're breaking a bit more often than they expected. And also, if they have to go and figure out what went wrong, having a 24-hour period compared to a week is much easier. So they've really kind of resorted to running them daily because it's technology that's doing it. There's not, additional labor. And then you look at the dashboard and see which ones failed and you're off to that.
Yeah, I think that scale is definitely an issue here as well, right? So if you're looking at a small company, okay, that's not a big deal if you have 1 or 2 networks. But if you're talking about multiple sites, multiple locations, different environments, different segments, doing this testing at scale is not an easy thing at all. So scale is another important part of it. Derek, any thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, definitely. So anytime you think about operational efficiency, right, and you think about scale, to your point, automation becomes a key component. And that's one of the reasons we have people, process, and technology. It allows us to use technology to scale, to take a look at things in a different way. From a detection engineering perspective, it really comes down to, are things working as expected? Right? It's not much different than testing your security controls. Are they working as expected? We do a lot of assumption-based security. We assume things are working and we hope that they're working, right? By testing and thoroughly understanding, we get to know that they're working as expected. We get to test our assumptions. So BAS and automation in general allow us to do that for a detection engineering program as well.
Yeah, I think that it's important. There's a saying I love that, hope is not a strategy, right? So you definitely want to move away from, I think my security controls and my detection mechanisms work to I know that they work because I'm testing them with real attacks and I'm doing it continuously. Um, so, you kind of mentioned people and process. Um, does SafeBreach help in that aspect as well? What are other areas that SafeBreach can actually help with?
From
And
a people
this is a question
process
for both of
perspective.
you.
Hmm?
So, I'm thinking things like, red teams and blue teams.
Oh, the types of component. Yeah, definitely. So red teams, definitely. So if you think about breach and attack sim, the red teams can use it to find things. They can dig in deeper, right? So you can sick breach and attack sim across a multitude of environments and then find something and dig in deeper. Also, they can find something and use breach and attack sim on it to dig in deeper so they can move on to the next thing. And when you think about using that as part of your detection engineering process, it helps feed the requirements gathering, right? You now have a lot more understanding and visibility into what's happening across your entire infrastructure.
Great. Jonathan, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I agree. So the the orange circles are where you have sort of a direct input and a direct output. Uh, uh, but the usefulness of BAS in really the top requirements gathering and testing and deployment, it's a bit more intangible. But yeah, as Derek and I've been saying, when you're doing BAS testing, you are going to be identifying threats and gaps. One really popular use case of ours is running the attacks that are from the CISA US cert alerts. And those involve a lot of TTPs that have been identified as. So the whole reason CISA publishes the alert is because there's an active group doing it, right? Any risk assessment has the two factors of, sure, how bad would it be if it happened, but also it's important how likely it is to happen. And so these things that are almost imminent, right, highly likely to happen, those are always good candidates. And that's just part of the play. We have a whole lot of attacks that will already do different many of the TTPs. But also, a threat team can use BAS to help test versus their posture versus any threat that they have intel on, and that's part of the inputs for where to focus your efforts and what detections to make. And then we also have we have a major healthcare company that has gone as far as integrating BAS into their workflow for what they're doing as the detection as code as part of modifying it. And it highlights some of the strengths of our SafeBreach platform, where the platform is very API friendly, and the integrations are the way they're built. It's not just how many of them there are, but also the way they are customizable and designed to be adjusted as needed to a particular team's need. So effectively, their workflow is they get the idea for their detection, they write the detection, but then they have a automation where they click go on the playbook. It will create the custom attack and safe breach. It will run it. It will wait for the integrations to get the logs, and it will send the results back to their development environment, will do their SOAR environment, and they can get a pass fail on their detection. And it's to the point to where the person writing the detection doesn't necessarily need to be trained on how to use SafeBreach because the technology does it. So those are some exciting things for the very, I think, kind of cutting edge of what folks are using the technology as and part of their flow.
So, I want to leave some time for questions, but let's, another question that I have is, are there any particular industries or verticals that you think can benefit from using BAS and, specifically SafeBreach? Obviously, we're biased, but in terms of creating a detection engineering program.
Definitely going to be your heavily regulated, right? The ones that are in dire need, your financials, your healthcare, your heavily regulated industries, right? We're seeing a lot more on the OT side of the house as well. So helping them with the detection engineering side, helping them understand the OT environments are very useful as well.
Great. KJ, as I said, I want to leave some time for questions. Do you have any questions on the line?
Oh, absolutely. So before that, I just wanted to cover a couple of housekeeping items, small ones at that. So a couple of things that I do want to kind of cover for the attendees and anyone who is probably going to view this on demand. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today and are in or near the Dallas area, Fort Worth area, please do join us for Validate Central. It's our user group meeting. It's on May 22nd. It'll be a full day of engaging sessions, panel discussions, and networking. Typically, the topics included in there, in addition to meeting your customer success, your account managers, your sales rep, you'll have a chance to kind of hear from our leaders about, how BAS can be leveraged to evolve and enhance not just detection engineering, but other of your security efforts. The role of BAS in cybersecurity testing, addressing the threats in the era of artificial intelligence, and even more. And there would be customers who will be talking about their experiences. You get a chance to network with them as well. Next, another thing is that we also have our upcoming webinar on May 30th. This one focuses on continuous threat exposure management, which is a model from Gartner. This webinar will focus on, the point of view of what exactly is CTEM or continuous threat exposure management, and how, in short, BAS tools can potentially help directly help you implement that CTEM model, because that's what the industry is kind of going towards. Again, the webinar is on May 30th, at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern. The registration is available currently on our website, so feel free to go ahead and register there. Now, coming to questions, again, I just want to remind everyone, whoever hasn't had a chance to submit their questions, please do leverage the Q&A functionality on Zoom webinar. I do have a couple of questions that have come in that I do want to ask the panelists. What are some of the other use cases that would pair BAS use cases that would pair well with detection engineering?
Great question, right? Because having a BAS program, but BAS is I call it kind of an all-you-can-eat buffet, because the functional testing and then having the data to quantify a risk, that is useful in most, if not almost all, of your aspects or security functions and security roles. So we do have several different use cases that we can kind of identify and focus on. So some of the ones that I think really lend themselves well to detection engineering is alert pipeline validation. And so this is not just did your detection work. Sometimes you can have 2 or 3 things that are detected that then actually give you that high enough confidence to have an alert that would go to an analyst. But there's all sorts of points in that alert validation pipeline that can fail, to where you can have the best analyst in the world sitting there at the SOC, but if they don't get the alert, you might have successfully detected it, but the alert generation didn't hit their single pane of glass. That's still a rough day. And so there are customers using this technology to absolutely make sure that all of those tickets hit the analyst desk. Another one I've talked about is the CERT alerts. So running that the CERT alerts and the emerging threats identify good candidates for detections. We also have an integration that will integrate with your threat intel providers, so that can pull in what I call like hot off the press IOCs, hashes, URLs, even newer TTPs that have been identified. It can pull in those IOCs, and it will easily, with a few clicks, it'll plug those IOCs into existing attacks we have that simulate that activity. And all of those things just to really give you a lot of return on your time that you're spending doing SafeBreach testing.
Avi, Derek, anything else you want to add for that?
You're muted, Avi.
Avi, you're on mute.
You're muted.
I hit the Zoom bingo. Person speaking while on Zoom, while on mute. So one of the things I wanted to add to it is actually, and it's a little bit tangential to detection engineering, but that is the really the integration with the SOC, or how detection engineering works along with the SOC. Um, you know, every organization should have an incident response plan, and they should be testing it as well. Your detection engineering should be plugged into that, and you want to make sure that the outputs of those detection capabilities are meaningful to the SOC, and that you are able to exercise your incident response. By having a BAS platform, you can actually make your testing of your incident response plan and your detection outputs to the SOC a lot more meaningful. You can actually go through a real attack cycle and see that the communication channels are working as intended. The SOC is responding correctly. They can identify the attack, identify the source, and all the relevant aspects of that attack. So that, from my point of view, it's another crucial part of how BAS and detection engineering can actually help an organization.
Thank you. So we do have a couple of other questions. Philip asks, do you have integration with SIMs like Splunk, QRadar, Sentinel, and offer evaluation of the detection rules of the SIM? I'll just go ahead and say yes, indeed we do. We do have several solution briefs that you can actually leverage. So if you just go to our website, are you guys seeing the technology partner screen?
So yeah, so it is, we have quite a few integrations with pretty much any of the typical SIMs, and you know, it's, we've got a very developed integration ecosystem. So I highly recommend that you check it out.
Absolutely. And as I was going to say, if you see my screen right now, we do have all these integrations and solution briefs in there. So if you click on any of them, you do see that you are able to monitor the efficacy of your SIM by validating that the security control was indeed sending the right alerts and they were being accurately tracked in your SIM. So absolutely, we do that. So please feel free to visit our website under resources and search for SIM, and you actually you'll be able to see that as well. The next question I do have here is that do you have, this is from James, do you have any best practices for dealing with the volume of results that you get out of SafeBreach while keeping up with new scenarios and content?
Absolutely. So we like to start with a big picture view, right? We're looking for outliers and inconsistencies. The goal is to ensure our security standards are working and are set across our entire environment. And oftentimes what we see is inconsistencies in those standards. So we start there. Let's get consistent out the gate, right? And then we can work towards whatever metric you desire as far as score. And you can then do consistent testing to ensure your score doesn't drift negative for sure. Hopefully it drifts positive, right? So the real deal, and this is why the procedure is so important, is adversaries, if you look at the techniques, are doing pretty much the same thing consistently, right? Regardless of the adversary. They're persistent threats across the board, right? So as you dial things in and get things set, when you're consistent, when your standards are set, you start to minimize the impact of pretty much every adversary, at least the 80% that are doing very similar things.
Perfect.
I would also say, you know, kind of going back to part of what James was asking, there's SafeBreach has you know, some great technical account managers. Jonathan is definitely one of them, and Derek heads our services group that has really excellent TAMs that can help you really customize the environment to your needs. I would recommend, having kind of almost a this is your routine. This is how you're continuously testing your environment, but then also have a ready set that incorporates the latest and greatest is kind of the wrong term for it. Latest and greatest set of threats that get announced by CISA or CERT, and that SafeBreach adds on a really continuous basis. That way, you can always have a kind of a quick test to make sure that your environment, your reference environment, is resilient to a given or a new emergent threat, while still maintaining your continuous monitoring and testing of your regular environment. Any questions?
My apologies, Ali. I do had the sharing get kind of got a little wonky. But Philip, kind of going back to your question on all the attendees, we're talking about the alert pipeline validation. We do have a blog here on our website. So if you just go to our resources and blog and just search for alert pipeline, you'll see how SafeBreach can help you validate your alert pipeline. Additionally, for all the attendees, I just want to kind of highlight, we have also created and uploaded a brand new detection engineering with SafeBreach data sheet that you can get additional information from. And if you do obviously have any questions, feel free to submit them to our online form or reach out to your sales or technical account managers. We do have time for one more question. The question that we have here is that what are some of the common challenges that the detection engineers face based on the panelists' experiences with working with customers and just in general the security industry?
Anyone want to start, or do you want me to pick it off?
You can pick it up, Bob.
Okay, so I'll because I obviously face those challenges myself, right? So as with any program, it's the signal to noise ratio, right? And I think, James, you kind of alluded to that in your question. There's a lot of data out there. And it's important to understand that SafeBreach, unfortunately or fortunately, does generate quite a bit of that data, right? The important thing to remember is that the attacks that SafeBreach generates are real attacks. They're not synthetic data. It's not synthetic attacks, in that they are real attacks that we've seen out in the field and we're able to vouch for in terms of their effectiveness. So know that if an attack that SafeBreach sends shows up as successful, means that one of your detection mechanisms or prevention mechanisms failed. And you are now able, in your time, to actually adjust your detection mechanisms and hopefully your prevention mechanisms to properly handle that attack. So again, it goes back to the magnitude of the challenge. Attackers have more tools. They can they take advantage of the cloud environment, serviceless attacks, and really make it hard to identify and respond to an attack. And with a BAS tool, again, biased towards SafeBreach, you're able to actually simulate that and get ahead of those attacks. And you're able to do it in your time. You're doing it safely without incurring any risk to your environment. Any other comments, Derek, Jonathan?
I agree. Volume is definitely an issue with the consistent innovation that happens, right? And signal and noise is one of the things that becomes very difficult. So having a tool that emulates adversary behavior consistently allows you to start to separate that signal from the noise.
Jonathan?
Yeah, so one of the struggles from, oh, I think there's some echo, KJ, from coming through. Um, one of the struggles a frontline engineer creating the actual logic for the detection can face is, hey, what does this activity actually look like? What kind of logs would be generated? What tools would I have the logs, right? So, if you think about like a structural engineer, you're trying to build a bridge, ideally, like they might want to build like a 6-lane bridge that is like super durable that will last a million years, but there's a more realistic budget and time frame and constraints that these need to be done within. And so part of that is being efficient and effective with your time. And so instead of having to kind of theory craft what logs and everything, sometimes you can just like if you simulate the activity, well, now you have what it looks like in the logs, and you have a great starting point for cat tagging logs and teaching controls. Hey, maybe this is, you can give different values and weights and create your logic from there. So sometimes just simulating the activity, you can see what it's going to look like. That gives you really a good, quick and easy head start for making any particular detection.
Perfect. So that is about the time we had for this interactive session. Again, thank you everyone for taking the time to listen to this interactive fireside chat. As a reminder, again, this webinar was being recorded, and it will be shared with every one of you in follow-up email with additional detection engineering related resources. We also do encourage you to go ahead and visit our website and search for any specific queries that you might have, like alert validation or solution brief regarding integration, such as detection engineering. And as always, if you do have further questions, do not hesitate to reach out to us via our contact us form or reaching out to your technical account manager or your sales rep. With that being said, I would like to thank each and every one of you, the presenters and the attendees, for taking the time to share your thoughts and obviously listen to them. Have a wonderful rest of the day and rest of the week. Thank you again. Take care.
Thanks. See you.
I think so.